I have seen the Lord. That's what Mary of Magdala said to the disciples on that first Easter morning. I have seen the Lord. These are the most powerful words of the Christian experience, of the Christian religion, of the Christian gospel. I have seen the Lord. Welcome to Sunday in the House. I am your host, Dr. Dwight Moody, coming to you from my studios in Travelers Rest, South Carolina, with a red letter lesson, some comments about life, basketball, and my new book, plus this framed art sitting right there with Fenwick. Remind me to tell you sometime about Fenwick. But this art can be yours, and I'm going to talk about that a little later in the program today. But first, our red letter lesson, Jesus. I have seen the Lord. That was not the first thing that Mary said. Mary was at the tomb on that first Sunday morning. The story is told in the Gospel of John, chapter 20, which begins with these famous words. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary of Magdala went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance of the tomb. She went to Simon Peter and said, quote, "They've taken the Lord from the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." End quote. Now, Mary had every reason to believe what she said, but she had no evidence. She just surmised that if the stone was gone, so must Jesus be gone. And if he was gone, they, meaning the enemies of Jesus, or perhaps the authorities of Jerusalem or Rome, they must have taken him. It must have been a cruel plot. They have taken the Lord from the tomb. It is reasonable what she said, but of course it was wrong. Not everything reasonable and logical is right. You know this. Sometimes things that are true are very surprising, shocking even, unbelievable. Mary spoke sense about the situation, but it turns out to have been nonsense. The men looked in the tomb, it was empty, and the text says this: the disciples went back to where they were staying. Matter of fact, the text in other places said that when the women reported things to the men, they did not believe them. But in this narrative, simple matter of fact, an empty tomb, Jesus gone, let's go home. That's the men. But the story was that Mary stayed in the garden, told, as I said, in the 20th chapter of John. She was wrong about the body, but she was right about what to do. She stayed there, watching, waiting, wanting to see or hear or feel something that could explain things, that would reveal the truth, that would shed some light on what was for her a mystery. The text says that Mary looked into the tomb. Now, of course, the tomb in those days was really a cave. And in the cave, there would have been a number of ledges where bodies of deceased people were placed for a time. And there may be 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 ledges in a tomb. So the tomb was a place where you could enter. So Mary did that, and there was no Jesus. But sitting on that ledge, 2 angels. Mary was crying, and they asked her, "Mary, why are you crying?" And she said to them the same thing she said to Simon Peter. They've taken the body. We don't know where they have put him. Now, let's think about this for a minute. There are several places in the gospel narratives where Jesus anticipates his resurrection, where he's trying to prepare his disciples for all that was about to happen. The the violence of the authorities, the rejection of his ministry, and the intervention of God. He wanted to assure them that God was in control of things and God's purposes would be realized and fulfilled. But even though Mary had heard some of this, it did not seem to occur to Mary that God had raised Jesus from the dead. I find that remarkable. You know, I would have thought she would have come out saying, well, he did it. Jesus said God was going to raise him from the dead, and he did. But no, that's not what happened. She seems not to have expected a resurrection, an intervention by God. She did not seem to think God was going to do a mighty act. This is important, I think, because sometimes skeptics, people who really don't believe in the Christian story, they want us to think that ancient people were gullible and unsophisticated and apt to believe in remarkable things that we today are skeptical about. We today have a more discerning, demanding approach to the supernatural. They were easy believers, and we are demanding people, investigators. But here is Mary, a famous first century follower of Jesus, and the story here about her is that she seems to not think that resurrection or God or miracle was a possibility. Only this: they took the body. She actually says it 3 times. She says this, and the text says that she turned around and saw the gardener. At least she thought it was the gardener. She says to him, "Where did you put the body?" A second time, Mary assumes that there was no miracle, no resurrection, no act of God. "Where did you put the body?" This is the drama that played out on that first Easter morning with Mary of Magdala. Magdala was a small town up on the Sea of Galilee. 3 times Mary says this, first to the disciples, then to the angels, and finally to the person that she thought was the gardener. Who took the body and where is it? Now, today we think the empty tomb is one of the most compelling evidences of the resurrection of Jesus. If God did not raise Jesus, then somebody took the body and put it somewhere. Mary was right. Mary was reasonable. Mary was distraught. Where did you put the body? Then one spoken word. The man she thought was the gardener says one word. He says her name, Mary. Up until now, Mary had not recognized his voice. And I find this remarkable. I've met people that I knew 50 years ago. I do not recognize them. You know, they have no hair, they've gained weight. They've had 50 years of worn out on their face. But then when they speak, I recognize their voice. You know, this happens on the phone sometimes. An old friend will call you. You don't know who's calling, but as soon as they speak, you recognize their voice. We now have voice recognition as a security feature. Sometimes we may not recognize a single thing about them. As I said, their build, their hair, facial features, their size, or anything except the voice. Yet Mary did not recognize his voice until Jesus said her name. I find that interesting. Jesus did not say his name. He said her name. Now, today we're told that saying the name of a person is a fundamental important part of communication, of connection, of memory. It's one of the tools that memory experts give us. Jan and I met a couple yesterday afternoon, 2 new people. And we had to say their name several times in order to remember it. Jesus said her name, and she knew instantly that it was Jesus. I could preach a real sermon on that phrase, when Jesus says your name. Many people give some testimony like this: the Lord spoke to me. Far more people can say that today than can mimic the testimony of Mary of Magdala when she said, I saw the Lord. Very few people can say that today. I say the Lord has spoken to me on more than one occasion, not often. I wonder if you have a testimony like that. Have you ever felt that the voice that you hear inside of you is the voice of the Lord? That the word that you hear spoken in your conscience, in your mind, in your spirit, in your soul is something the Lord is trying to say to you, to comfort you, to call you, to convict you, to promise you strength and stamina. That's the testimony that we need today. That's the testimony that people want to hear. That is a resurrection testimony. That last week or last year or even last night, the Lord spoke to me and said, do not be afraid. I will strengthen you. I can see the way ahead. Jesus called her name when he said Mary. And Mary heard it and understood and knew that it was Jesus. Then he said, go and tell the others. Mary ran to the gathering of the followers of Jesus, all of it told in this story. I could have read it word for word, all of it. My message today is this, my red letter message. A few people saw Jesus that first resurrection morning. A few were in the garden, some were on the road, others in the room that night. Just a few. Some we know by name, most remain nameless. But Jesus, according to the Gospel of John, said to one of them later that day, quote, you believe because you've seen me. Blessed are those who do not see me in the flesh, but still believe, end quote. And when he said that, he was talking about you and me. He was giving a blessing to you and to me. Blessed are you, blessed am I, because we believe in the resurrection and in the God who raises the dead. Even though we were not there in the garden, we were not there on the road to Emmaus, we were not there in the upper room. Why do we believe? We believe because others have given powerful testimony and because it is consistent with the God of heaven and earth, and because victory over life and death gives hope, and often because somebody else inserts a resurrection word or deed into our lives. What I mean by that is this: somebody else behaves toward us in a resurrection way. Somebody speaks to us a resurrection word. Somebody pours out all over us, body and soul, some resurrection love. Let me unpack that for a minute. Sometimes people are generous when they don't have to be. That's resurrection generosity. Sometimes people are gracious when they don't have to be. Sometimes they're hospitable when they don't have to be. People are acting with resurrection power. They forgive us when we've done them wrong. They serve us when we have demeaned them. They speak kindly when we have cursed them. They return life for death, love for hate, kindness for crudeness, a smile for a sneer, hope for despair. One of the greatest resurrection witness stories happened right down here in South Carolina. And the people were gathered in Mother Emanuel AME Church, as they call it down there. They were having Bible study and prayer meeting on Wednesday night. The pastor was there, was a state senator here in South Carolina. You remember the story. I think it was 11 years ago. And a man came in with evil intent and purposes. They thought he was just joining the prayer meeting. They extended hospitality and kindness and warmth to him. But at a certain point in the prayer meeting, you remember what he did. He pulled out a gun and started shooting, killed a bunch of them. But after things settled down, they arrested him, they brought him into court. You know what those people said? We forgive him. We forgive him. Not everybody can do that. I've heard other people say, I'll never be able to forgive so and so for what they did. But those people in that, I believe it was a ground floor room in Mother Emanuel AME Church, Charleston, South Carolina, they stood in court and said, we've forgiven him. This is resurrection power. This is resurrection testimony. And I'll say that kind of testimony is more compelling and more powerful than the testimony that Mary Magdalene gave that morning when she said, I have seen the Lord. When somebody acts toward us with resurrection power, that is one more piece of evidence that the God of the resurrection day gives us power to transcend darkness and defeat and even murder. People can speak kindly when we have cursed them, as I said a minute ago. They return life for death, love for hate, kindness for crudeness. They give a smile when we've given them a sneer. Every time you do that, every time you act like Jesus to a lonely or angry or despairing person, you are dispensing resurrection power. You're testifying to the risen Lord. When you speak a word of acceptance to a person who is rejected by society, you are being a witness to the resurrected Lord. There are lots of people around that our society rejects. Right now, we're in this big thing where we're demonizing trans people and we're demonizing people of color and we're demonizing and rejecting immigrants and undocumented people. This is the way of the world. It is wickedness. And every time you say to them, welcome, I receive you, I honor you, I see you, I say your name, you are acting with resurrection power. You are bringing light into a dark place. You are bringing hope into a despairing place. That is the kind of resurrection testimony we need. When you bless somebody who's been cursing you, you're being a witness to the risen Lord. And these kinds of acts of resurrection power are what we need today. They are the evidence of the risen Lord. They're more powerful than a testimony written in a book 2,000 years ago. You remember the thief who hung on the cross next to Jesus? There were two of them, and they were both disparaging Jesus and taunting him, cursing the executioners, cursing the crowd, awaiting their death. Jesus said to him, instead of saying, shut up, they said, today you'll be with me in paradise. That is a resurrection witness 3 days before the resurrection. Remember when Jesus forgave Simon Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times? That is resurrection witness. And sometimes you may have to do that. To forgive somebody who has turned on you, who has denied you, demeaned you. You may have a testimony today of somebody who was a resurrection witness to you, who by their kindness or their forgiveness or their generosity or their words of hope or inclusion or blessing said what you needed to hear, was what you needed to feel. I want to say all around you every day are people who need that kind of witness to the resurrection of Jesus. They don't really need somebody quoting the Bible to them. They need somebody speaking hope and love and forgiveness and acceptance and hospitality. They need somebody who's in their kitchen today, praying with them, holding their hand, speaking words of encouragement, singing a song of hope, maybe reading a poem of beauty or joining in a laugh of silliness. That is the kind of resurrection witness we need today. Somebody you know needs that kind of witness and presence today. Maybe it's you. And maybe I've said something today that brought some fresh hope and faith and love into your soul, into your life. And if so, then I have been a witness to the risen Lord. And you can be that same kind of witness to somebody today or tomorrow, sometime this week or next. But go and do it, so that somebody can say, after spending some time with you, I felt the Lord today. I heard the Lord today. Even I've seen the Lord today. Praise God. That's my red letter lesson today. Is that what you needed today when you got up on this Easter morning? We need the red letter Jesus today, because many people are invoking our Christian heritage and faith without consulting with Jesus, without quoting Jesus, without following Jesus. They want religion without the risen Lord, Christianity without Christ. They want spirituality without the Savior. That is the demonic element of our political environment today. Sometimes all we can do is pray for these people. Jesus prayed for people he didn't know, had never met, who weren't even alive at his lifetime. Sometimes we feel helpless, given all the powerful things that are happening around the world, things out of our control. Sometimes all we can do is just pause and fold our hands, bow our head, and pray for the people in Iran and Iraq. Nobody likes bombing. We need to pray for people in Israel and Gaza and Lebanon. They're all just people. They don't like what their leaders are doing. We need to pray for people in Ukraine and Russia, both of them. The people of Ukraine and Russia don't like this war. In Guatemala and Cuba and Venezuela, the same. In Mexico and Miami and Minneapolis, people don't like violence, guns and death and danger. And all these people everywhere, what they need is a resurrection witness. They don't need any more bombs or missiles or drones. They need peace and hope and safety and something to eat, a place to sleep. They need to hear the laughter of their children and the stories from their grandparents. And I want to say, this war that our country started is an unholy war. I don't care what the Secretary of War says or prays. He can't be trusted. He's using religion to be mean and violent and dangerous. You know that. I know that. He's using prayer to be vicious and dangerous. He is invoking the name of Jesus to do the very thing Jesus told us not to do. He is, in that sense, anti-Jesus, anti-Christ, anti-Christian. Yes, I know the Bible says there is a time for war, Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 8, but this is not it. There is a time for war, but it's not now. There's a time for war, and we've had too many of those in this century and the last. Now's the time for peace and security and conversation and compromise and community. Shalom, the Hebrew word for peace. Sadly, our president and his people do not know how to get us out of this war jam that we are in. They have led us into a dead end, a cul-de-sac, a busted bridge. We can't go forward, and we don't know how to go back. Somebody said this week, our president had a plan to get out of the Vietnam War when he was younger, but he has no plan to get all of us out of the Middle East. today. But we need to pray for Trump and his people. They need prayer. They need humility and forgiveness and mercy. They need wisdom. They need mercy. Remember when the preacher on Inauguration Day, 15 months ago, spoke directly to the president? The Reverend Marianne Budd. Be merciful, she said to the president, quoting Jesus, invoking Jesus, echoing Jesus. Be merciful. People need mercy. That was a gentle call from a resurrection voice, calling on the president to be a resurrection person, a resurrection president, a resurrection leader. All of us need to heed this call, even if the president does not. You and I can be merciful and kind and strong and generous and joyful, and in all things, hopeful. That is the kind of resurrection witness we need today. Now, in the last few minutes that we have together, let me say just a few words about life as I've known it this week. Basketball. It's been a dramatic week for the University of Connecticut basketball players. A lot of us watched the Connecticut men beat Duke last weekend. And Connecticut will play for the national championship on Monday night. And then the Connecticut women lost to South Carolina. And it will be South Carolina that will play for the national championship, the women, this afternoon, Sunday afternoon. By the time some of you watch this broadcast, those games will be over. I want to announce I'm going to officially embrace the South Carolina women basketball team as my team. I'm pledging my loyalty. When I lived in Lexington, I signed on with the Kentucky Wildcats as a kid. We moved to Pittsburgh, and from day one, I was a Steeler fan and am to this day. When we moved down to Owensboro, I adopted the Red Devils and cheered for them because all three of my children were athletes there for the Owensboro Red Devils. And now in South Carolina, I'm going with Dawn Staley. I'm on her team now. Go Gamecocks. Today is Sunday, of course. Jan and I are going to church today. It's a good day to go to church. I used to think that Christmas and Easter attenders were low on the totem pole. That's back when I was leading congregational life, but not so much now. In fact, I wrote a column about it a few years ago. For all of you C&E people, as we called them, Christmas and Easter, find a place to go today. Give it a try. Our country needs vibrant and active church communities. Communities that are preaching Jesus, practicing peace, praying forward for everybody, paying forward, I should say, and praying for leaders here and there and everywhere. Join them today for the music, for the handshake, for the prayers, for the resurrection. Finally, two quick things. I've spent this Holy Week tied to my desk editing my book for publication. I've called it Eating That Gospel Pie. It's a collection. Here is one version of it, pages after pages. You know, over the last 8 years, I've written 400 or more columns. Out of those 400, I've selected a little over 100 and put together a book that I now call Eating That Gospel Pie. That's a quote from a John Prine song, as you might suspect. Subtitle, How I Survived Life, Politics, and Religion. And there are 10 sections in it. I'll have more to say about that in the coming weeks. It'll be the first book published under my new imprint, the Meeting House Press. Save your money. This summer, you're going to be able to buy a book, or this fall on the Tangle Tour. And finally, the framed art. You see this? Some of you have never seen this. I've never shown it. The text is my copyright text, 9 words of a Christian marriage. I love you. Let us pray. Please forgive me. 9 words of a Christian marriage. Pretty basic stuff. I'm not the artist, just the minister. I've used these 9 words many times as the wedding homily. And I commissioned an artist from Frankfort, Kentucky, Rosalie Anderson, to do the lettering. I have copies of this limited edition, high quality printing. It makes a perfect anniversary gift or wedding gift or a lover's gift anytime. If you would like to buy one of these for $200, write me. I'll be glad to send you one of these. You'll be so proud of it. I've given several away as wedding gifts, and you can do that too, or anniversary gifts. You can see the size of it. This is our framed copy in our home. Yes, and today the Meeting House is the Meeting House version of QVC, and you can buy that this week. Buy it today before it runs out. Thank you for tuning in to Sunday in the House. Let me hear from you. Go to the website at themeetinghouse.net. You can read lots of things there. You can make a donation. We depend upon your help. Several came in this week. Pray for those around you. Be a resurrection person. And I'll see you next Sunday in the house. Hope you have a great day.